Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from Capital One Bank and Chase Commercial Term Lending, the Witkoff Group, New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Greenberg Traurig, Perfect Building Maintenance, Genova Burns. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Foley & Lardner, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investment Developers, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman, USRealty.com, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Massey-Knackle Realty Services, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, N.A., Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Newbanks, MHP Real Estate Services, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Sterling Risk, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Continuum Company, the CUNY TV Foundation, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
Comedy has been around since the days of Aristotle.
Oh, my.
So today, I've decided to be a martyr and to allow two comedians, two fellow friars, to discuss the world of comedy in the 21st century. My guests today include the legendary Stewie Stone and his younger version, the Dave Konig. Now, as we were saying prior to the show, I said, you've been in this business 50 years?
Let's not go crazy. 49.
49. And you've been in the business, forget the child acting.
When I was a child actor.
Okay,
but then you mean comedy.
In the world
Strictly
of comedy.
stand-up comedy
Stand-up,
since the late 80s.
Since the late 80s. So how hard is it for a young person to become a comedian today?
I think...
Why are you asking him?
I meant...
You want to know the truth? I honestly believe it's easier today than when I started to become a comedian, because you have so many outlets. You have the comedy clubs. You could go, you could run around the city and do 3 shows a night. When I started, the outlet was you started in strip clubs, maybe a Saturday night or a Friday night, and you waited once a week. There were no comedy clubs. There was nothing. So I went from.
Now, did you go by horse and buggy?
No, no, it was the best. You drove the stripper up. You got $50 for the job and $5 to drive the stripper up. But when you got to the Triborough Bridge, you had to get the money, because they would, when they got to the other side, they jump out the car, get the subway, and you wouldn't get the $5. Okay. So you had to stop the car and say, "Are we going to settle up now?" You know.
So you had the strip clubs were first.
Strip clubs were first.
And then?
And then, well, I have to correct myself. I was a musician. And I worked for Maya Davis, Stephen Scott, Lester Lannon, and I played the weddings and the bar mitzvahs. So I would be like, I learned a little bit by being the MC of the evening. And I would do the candle lighting ceremony when at a bar mitzvah. Now Uncle Herbie comes up to light the candle. So I learned to talk a little bit and be comfortable in front of people. But comedy started in strip clubs.
But today, you know, we were talking.
Yeah.
There are more outlets, and there are many people who want to be comedians. But in today, you know, even at the club, we have the Harvard comics.
You got there's a Harvard Mafia out there in comedy. There's which is a new thing. Comedians with Ivy
Especially
League
since we know your educational background. You went to a couple of schools.
I have a GED, and I'm generally employed at Denny's. I'm proud of that. But I just got to say,
You just got a raise.
I'm feeling inadequate because I didn't know you got your socks and your socks. I did not know this was you guys are like from a production of Peter Pan,
exactly.
and I got my black dress. If I had known, I would have worn like a paisley.
Get to the subject over here, or we're getting.
This is going to take a while. I haven't got all day.
No, but the deal is with comedy. The great thing about stand-up comedy is if you want to be in show business, if you're an actor, you got to wait for someone to write a script. You got to wait for a director to cast you in a play. You got to. It's a whole thing. With stand-up comedy, you find a joint, you go out, you're on stage, you're performing in front of an audience, and that's what attracted me when I first got into stand-up. I was an actor, but I was waiting. I was waiting for people to call me. Stand-up comedy, you're self-motivated. You go out, you do it.
Stand-up comedy is basically a pure American art form. When you say what was created in the United States, America's thing was stand-up comedy. Music came from Europe. I mean, the whole European culture brought it here. If you check the early writers, the Cole Porters, the Irving Berlins, it was written with that Eastern European feel to it. But stand-up comedy is an American art form. To stand on a stage in one, with nobody behind you.
With no set, no script.
Burlesque, there was the straight man and the comic, but stand-up comedy, stand there and talk. That's difficult.
But we were talking also, even at the Friars, there's a different level of comedians. There's a different camaraderie in the world of comedy, you were saying,
The difference is, when I started, we were all friends. We all worked the Playboy clubs. There were 3 comics a night, so you knew 3 guys worked for 2 weeks together. The older comics were all in vaudeville together, were in burlesque together. When they became stars, they had been through 20 or 30 years of working together. So if you wanted to do a show, you would call George Burns. He said, wait, I'll call Jack Benny. Jack Benny would call Al Jolson. And in 3 minutes, you had a show. Today, guys are not that friendly. The stars isolate. There's not this camaraderie where they hang together. They isolate. I learned that being the entertainment chairman at the Friars Club. To do a dinner or a roast is very difficult.
By the way, do we have enough apples on the set?
Yes.
Get some more apples? I'm concerned that these are not going to last for the whole 26 minutes.
You won't be able to eat one.
All right,
Okay. So how is it today? Okay, you're out there. You're the younger comedian. We were talking. I said Stewie was like the senior elder statesman.
I don't like where this is
okay,
going.
Senior elder statesman that we called him the. Then he said that he's ancient.
All right.
And you're old. Okay?
No,
so
I would.
So you're an old comedian.
No, I'm not
okay?
an old
and
comedian.
You
Let's
have
qualify this. I am a funny comedian.
I am not.
Age doesn't enter into it.
I'm at the Friars Club. I'm a baby.
No,
because my prostate is only slightly enlarged.
But
so this
how do you get a gig today?
How do you get a gig?
How do you get a job today?
Does the word praying mean anything to you?
Besides davening and all, but how do you get a job?
Well,
I mean, look,
the
only
business,
you converted from Judaism to Catholicism.
That's a whole nother
back
story.
to Judaism, so you could get jobs. But how do you get a job?
The business is it's very interesting because while there was an explosion of stand-up comedy, and there's thousands of joints out there where you can work, but the actual paying, the money, has contracted for the working class.
Since when are we talking about financial remuneration?
You just asked me, how do you make a living? You're the one who brought it up.
When I was in the business, really hot in the business, I opened for every major star. I did 35 weeks a year in Vegas, 15 weeks a year in Lake Tahoe and Reno. So there was a big living out there.
Do you know the kind of money this guy made?
My dream was not to be a star. These kids today say, oh, I want to be a star. I have my own series. My dream was to open for Sinatra. If I could tour with Frank Sinatra, that was the epitome of making it. I never made it, but I toured with every other star.
But you toured with Frankie Valli, okay?
I toured with Frankie for 43 years.
43 years. What I was saying to you is, last week I went to the Barclays Center. I saw Neil Diamond. In the past, there was always an opening act. Even when I saw Billy Joel a couple of months ago, there was this opening act for 20 minutes. So the opening acts aren't there. The performance
the whole
is just going
business has changed. When Stewie was making the big money, big money opening for...
It's nice that he counts your money.
Absolutely.
I like it.
But when he was making the big money for Sonny and Cher and opening for Frankie Valli and all these great headliners, you know, the business was different. The headliners now, you know, Jay-Z and you know, the big spectacle acts. If you put a comic on that stage with 5,000 smoke bombs and 40,000 backup dancers, the comic's going to get lost.
Wait a second. Could you see a Jewish guy, a Jewish comedian with Jay-Z?
Exactly right. That's why I'm hitting in New Jersey next week to open for Bill Haley's Comets. These are the opening act gigs that are available.
It's a different star system. So Frank Sinatra, the greatest star of all time, stood on the stage and worked in one. He had a big band. He didn't have background singers. He didn't have cannons going off. It was pure talent. Today, the performers, you don't know if they're talented. You don't know if they could sing because it's all lip syncing and it's 42 guys dancing and cannons going off. And they don't want an opening act. I'll tell you why they don't want an opening act. The casinos want an hour-and-a-half show. My buddy Frankie works now. They want 2 hours. That's what they demand in a concert, 2 hours from beginning to end. Why? I was there for an intermission. I would go on. There'd be an intermission. They go out. They drink. They come back in. Now people don't get out of the seats anymore.
Right.
You have an intermission. They sit there. They're not. They don't know what.
You got to move the act. Move the act.
Move it.
You just got a shot on Louis C.K., right?
The hottest, hippest TV show in comedy.
Okay, so Louis C.K. is how old?
Louis C.K. claims to be 47, and I wouldn't doubt him because he just employed me. He's 47.
So Louis C.K. is a comedian who has a little roughness around the edges, as one would say. How's Louis C.K. got into his own show? You know, it was Seinfeld. Everybody remembers Seinfeld. There were other shows over there. How has Louis C.K.
Louis C.K., like any really good comic, has a unique voice, and he conveys that to the audience. And he's also put in the hard work. I mean, I remember Louis. I was doing stand-up here in New York City in the 1980s when Louis was, you know, starting out.
I'm going to tell you,
and there was a buzz about him then within the comedy club.
See, I'm going to teach you something that I learned.
Yeah,
I had a great manager. His name was Marty Kummer. He managed Jack Parr. He was part of Management 3, which was Bernie Brillstein, Jerry Weintraub, and Marty Kummer. Okay? And when he would manage me, he told me something. He said, let me tell you something about comedy or anything else that I've learned in show business. Audiences mean nothing. You could kill an audience every night. Means nothing. There are maybe 50 or 60 important people in show business. Be it the head of CBS, be it the head of the network, whatever it is, you make 3 of those 50 people like you, you will be a star.
See, that's the problem. I don't know those 3 people.
No, that's what it takes. It takes one guy to say, I like this kid, Louis C.K. I could push him, and I'll put him on.
It takes one guy, but now...
The talent means nothing. There are funnier guys than Louis C.K. that can't make a living. There are funny people out there that don't get the break.
Look, I go to the club. I work out with some young guys at night at the club. I got 2 guys three. The one guy who had some roles in The Sopranos or in Boardwalk Empire. Okay. At least 2 of them don't make a living.
One works as they make a living.
No. As comedians, they try. No, it's not the question of living. It's hard to get a job. They talk about I'm doing this. I'm working the.
There are very few jobs. That's the problem. When I started in comedy, there were 20 or 25 comedians. You had Buddy Hackett, Shecky Green, Myron Cole. You had a bunch of guys. You can count them. Today, there are thousands of comedians. When I started, there was one female comedian. It was
Trixie.
Trixie
Lipschitz.
Jean Carroll. You remember Jean Carroll, okay? And then it became whoever it was. Now you got loads of female comedians.
But you're asking a question. There's 2 different things here. You're asking how to make a living and the business end of it. But the actual passion of doing this, you have to do it because you have no other choice. You know, you do it because that's who you are. And whether or not you make a living is almost ancillary. It's nice to make a living. Don't get me wrong.
Let me tell you something.
Let's be realistic. Both of you. I mean, Stewie has a 17-year-old daughter who wants to go to college, and you have a couple.
I got 4. I got 4 kids,
so,
which is a lot of kids.
You know, it may be nice that you enjoy it, but there's a question of, you can enjoy it and have a different daytime job,
I'm going to bring up a point. I have to make a living because I have a beautiful daughter, Savannah, and a wonderful wife, Franny, and my daughter is going to go to the American University in Paris. For a kid from Brooklyn, dyslexic, that say my daughter's going to a beautiful college in France where she will major in croissants. I don't know what she's going to do there. Okay. But the point that I'm making is comedy still is Shangri-La. These young kids have a dream. It's the only business where you could say, if I make it, I'll have my own series, I'll have this. The dream is still there. These comics are not going in to make a living. Like I went in to make a living to support my mother and father and to live good and to live better than I grew up. These kids have a dream. They're not going in to say, I'm going to work comedy clubs for the next 20 years. They're dreaming of a series. They're dreaming of the home in Beverly Hills. I dreamt of all that, but I thought I would get it opening for the stars. I didn't realize you had to go past being a good comedian.
But you can have the dream of getting a TV series and having a home in Beverly Hills, but you also have to have the passion to do it that keeps you going for your whole life. Because when you don't get the home in Beverly Hills, you're still doing your act. You're still out there driving to some horrible gig to get $400 and put it in your pocket.
But not that many people last that point.
Plus gas and tolls.
Not that many people last that long
well, that's
anymore.
true.
The comics lasted, how George Burns was 100. All these, my buddy Norm Crosby, who I work with, is 85 years old. He's still going out there. Comics last a long time.
But Dave brought up before, the world of comedy today is, we have the internet, and people could try to be a comic by taping themselves.
And it's a whole different thing, and it's a terrible thing. I'll tell you why. Because when I started out, the way you learn how to do this is by doing it, and doing it, and doing it, and doing it, and doing as many gigs as you can get your hands on as often as possible, and getting on stage in front of an audience, 5 times a night, 6 times a night, 7 nights a week for years and years and years and years. You got to do this thousands of times to learn how to do it. Now, a young person puts something on YouTube, they get 400 hits, and they think they've done something, but they can't read lines. They can't get on stage. They can't be spontaneous for an audience.
Listen,
it's a whole different skill set.
David, the comedy is very simple. You got to be bad before you can be
exactly
good.
Right.
Nobody walks out on stage and is great. You only learn doing. I never learned anything getting a standing ovation. I learned by screwing up.
You got to go out and bomb and bomb
you
and bomb.
You got to bomb. You learn. You learn being bad. See, when I started, you had to be good. You got to report. If you didn't get a good report, you didn't work next week. So consequently, we were like waiters carrying the jokes out to the audience and giving it to them. And if you didn't like this one plate, you took it back, and it was off the menu the next night. And you had to experiment and be bad.
Which, by the way, to give credit where credit's due, and that, it's good to have 3 people bless you and say, okay, you're the guy, and we're going to put you on TV. But behind that, a guy like Louis C.K. is the same in the trenches for 20 years and grinding it out and learning how to do it.
I'm going to give you the best.
You got to put in the hard work.
I'm going to give you the best example in the world. I think she's wonderful, Lisa Lampanelli.
Right.
She's
a great gal.
She's a great gal, and she's been knocking around for years.
Right.
And when we did the roast, they didn't want to use her. She was dirty, whatever it was. She got this hip manager.
Yeah.
Didn't change one line. The guy that has the blue-collar comedy guys.
Yeah.
He had the power. He fell in love with her, and he forced her on The Tonight Show, and he forced her on there where she couldn't get it all these years, in 20 years, and she became a star.
You got to have good representation.
But you're saying,
my agent tells me things are going to pick up
one person,
as soon as I get a phone.
That one person that's out there chopping wood. Jay Leno was the luckiest guy in the world. And I hope he's listening to this, because he had that woman.
I'm sure he's tuning in right now.
That woman that was his manager.
Ellen Kushnick.
Ellen Kushnick, that lived and died Jay Leno. So when I would be on the road working Las Vegas or something with Paul Anka or at Engelbert Humperdinck, I didn't have anybody going to the agency. I had a manager, but he didn't go to the agency every day.
So
Helen Kushnick lived and died Jay Leno. When he was out there,
really
he had somebody.
Today, you need really good representation.
You need Helen Kushnick.
Okay.
That's what you need.
Where
the hell is she now?
He's waiting for you.
How do you become the next Jon Stewart? You were talking before, he had the show, the Colbert Show. How do you get to these type of things?
It happens. I mean, for example,
I know.
I'm trying to figure out.
He would shoot. He would kill him. He would try to
figure
kill
out
him.
how to be the next Michael Stoller.
Listen.
Let me do that first.
First, take your jacket off. he never heard of Larry King.
I got to buy the socks.
He didn't know that Larry King worked.
At least, look, Larry King doesn't wear. He doesn't try to match. I try to match.
Because you're making more money. You have money for that.
Yeah, he's out of work.
But listen, the comedy. Everybody has two businesses: their business and show business. Everybody could tell a comic what to do. Oh, I got a joke for you. I could take anybody and make him funny, not naturally funny. I'll take him 20 jokes. He'll go out. He'll do the 20 jokes, and people say, "Oh, he's really terrific." He's not a comic. He's a parrot. To be a comic, it has to come from your soul, your pain, inside. If you can't expose yourself to an audience and be real, you're not an artist.
So I was talking to you, young people come to me certain times to mentor. They want to ask my opinion. How do they get into
Why?
this? I'm asking, why does somebody come to you? Hey, Stewie, I've seen you. I know you. Or my grandparents heard of you.
My great-great-parents heard of you. I remember this guy.
Back in the old country.
He had the wig. He said to me, I'm going to be president, but could you help my grandson?
What happens to you when a young comic who joins the club, who's thinking of at the club, says to you, Stewie, give me some insight, okay?
My insight is very, very simple. My insight is do it. My insight is you got to get on a stage and do it. And if you're bad, you go back and do it the next night, and you'll get better. Just do it. Nobody can tell you what to do. Nobody can write your jokes. Do it.
There's no shortcuts. You see guys who sometimes get a break before they're ready, but they can't stay there, because they're not ready for it, because they haven't put in the hard work and the thousands and thousands and thousands of hours and the driving to the horrible gigs and the grinding out and the bombing and all that stuff that takes to get you to the point where you're actually good at what you do.
Listen. Most comics, I live on stage. On stage is my life. I'm in control there. You could understand why a guy like Robin Williams would be unhappy off stage. Well, why is he so unhappy? We are in control. That's your life. They can't yell at you. They can't tell you did this right. You can't get a phone call from the IRS. On that stage, you are in complete control. You know what magic it is? To go out and work, and I've worked to thousands of people, that they actually are sitting there listening to you. You know what a comic wants? Not laughter, silence. The thing that makes a great comedian, if he could stand on that stage and not get a laugh for a few seconds.
Then I must be a great comedian, because last night I had
stretches what I mean?
For minutes at a time where I didn't get a laugh.
That's the magic. That's controlling that audience. They're listening to you. It's your mother and father that didn't listen to you when you were a kid in the living room. That's what makes you do it.
You brought up before the world of bands. You were in a band before.
Right.
But at one time, bands even had people who were, they may have been partially with comics working on the bands. Mm-hmm. Today, most bands have been replaced by the DJs.
Everything has changed.
So the world, so you won't have a Stephen Scott orchestra bringing a Stewie Stone to an event over there. It's a different world.
Listen, it's a different world, and you have to adjust. And unfortunately, what we live in now, I think, is a very mean world. You have the computer, you have all this stuff. You could text people, I hate your guts, you're terrible, and not have to face them. You could be cruel, you could be mean, and never look them. You know what it's like not to have to look you in the eyes and tell you I don't like you?
But the flip side of that is that before the internet and before Twitter and before Facebook, if you were a comedian and you were working out your comic voice and you're working out your material, you were doing it in front of small audiences in the middle of nowhere. It was off the radar screen for years. Now every comic has the ability they got an idea, they tweet it out there, boom, and then they have to answer to that, to the thousands of people who get outraged. We have this perpetual outrage thing going on.
Buddy Hackett years ago said to me, when it's important, don't work before the cops. You know who the cops were? It was your family. It was your friends. It was all that. They're the cops. They're the ones that get you more nervous than the agents. If you don't find that when your relatives come in to see the show, you're more uptight than if an agent.
My relatives don't speak to me, so I don't have them come to the show.
You know, pretty soon I'm not going to speak to them.
But what about, you were talking about Vegas. So, we still have venues. We have Vegas, you have Atlanta.
We don't have
City.
Vegas anymore because there's very few acts that work in one in Vegas, because I'll explain what Vegas has become. Years ago, you did 2 shows a night and all that. Now you got people from all over the world coming in. You have Asians, you have Latinos. They may not understand what you're doing. So what the companies do is they put $50 million or $100 million into a show. It started with Siegfried and Roy, and these shows that were big productions that ran for 10 years. They did 2 shows a night. I once said to Steve, why do you do those shows? He said, a lion never cancels. Stars, I got sick. I don't want to do the second show. There's not enough people. I went through that with Stars. There's not enough people. I'm sick. Don't do it. These shows go on, these big productions. That's what Vegas is. It's Disneyland. It's big productions, 2 shows a night. They show up. They don't cancel. Everybody understands it. You don't have to worry about Asians not understanding it, Latinos not understanding it. It's all the big things. Now, when Celine Dion goes out, she doesn't work in one. She has a whole big show. Bette Midler, big shows.
So the thing for a comedian is to become a headliner, become a star yourself, so that it's your show.
Right.
Because the whole world of the opening act is gone, essentially, is what we're saying.
And right. So the young kids are doing very, very well, and I respect them. And it's also a different type Yuba. I don't understand it. It's saying things.
What about the cursing and the?
When I started, you weren't allowed to do it. When I started,
and then,
well, now they want it. There's nothing more exciting. You see what's going on than a pretty girl that talks dirty.
Right, but that's what
they
happens.
love that.
Okay,
they want.
When
that.
we go to a Friars roast, that's the ones that the Lisa Lamparelli, and who's the other one? The other
Jeff Ross.
No, the female.
Susie Essman.
Susie Essman, and then there's the
Sarah Silverman.
Sarah Silverman. Okay, and that's the comments. It's the cursing and the swearing that is in their act. Okay,
right.
It's a different that's a type. Jeffrey Ross is the similar manner. Okay,
well, but there's so much different comedy out there. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld doesn't curse. Louis C.K. doesn't really curse. I don't curse. The cursing is there's space for all kinds of comedy out there. And it's to generically say the young comics are all dirty is not really true.
It's not. Listen, when I started, I'll give you an example. I worked for Bill Harrah. Bill Harrah started Harrah's, famous Harrah's, and he had the best operator. He had 2 places. He had Reno and he had Tahoe. And Reno was a favorite nation. The biggest stars worked there. Everybody got the same money. But Bill Harrah had a clock in the floor. He told you how much time to do. And you had to live up to his feelings. If he was a heavyweight Republican, and I remember I once did a joke about Ronald Reagan. I said, we're losing him piece by piece. He said, take it out of your act.
Okay, but I think that comedy will survive in the 21st century. It's a different world. It survived all these years, and we'll have a different thing. I'm happy that I brought my fellow Friars, Stewie Stone and Dave Konig.
You brought up an interesting fact. That name another art form that's lasted over 110 years, the roast.
That's right.
It's gotten
I'm going to go out and buy some colorful
Thank you. Sit
socks.
back. Okay.
Thank you for inviting me.
See you next week.